Well, it's great to chat with our next guest, and it's interesting. Just last week, we were deciding who man of the match should be on Thursday, and I said, I'm going with Ryan Mountcastle, and everybody was mad at me, but I feel fortified and vindicated by my selection based on a segment that this guy did on the MLB Network. He is former big league slugger, MLB Network analyst Carlos Peña, and he's with us right now here on GCR. Carlos, it's Glenn in Baltimore. It's great to chat with you, man. Thank you so much for taking a couple of minutes for us.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Truly a pleasure.
Carlos, I really appreciate, and I appreciate all your work on MLB Network, but I really appreciated this segment you did about Ryan Mountcastle because I was feeling this last Thursday. The Orioles are playing the Yankees, and the bats hadn't really been hot the first 3 games of the series. They had been shut out the night before. And 2 different times, both with the solo home run early and then a base hit later, it was Ryan Mountcastle that really got them going in that game. And he made a couple of really nice plays at first base to boot. And the point that you're making about how overlooked Ryan Mountcastle is because of all of the other stars on this team, to me, really is significant. He has, since a little dip last year when he was dealing with vertigo, he's been a really critical part of the Orioles' success.
Absolutely. And you have to go back a couple of years because before all the young stars were called up, right, there was Mountcastle. And he was hitting tanks, going placata left and right. Actually hit 33 home runs not too long ago before the walls got moved back, which, by the way, I was like, what are they doing? Don't do that. But, of course, that's benefited the Orioles. But I think the dip, right, that small dip in production has a lot to do with those. There were many home runs that he hit when the fences were a little bit closer. And then you see in years after that, a lot of balls that were caught right on the warning track would have been home runs. So it's like he's still making really good contact, driving the ball gap to gap and coming through with some big hits. So I just felt the need to make sure that we understand that Mountcastle is a very critical part of this Orioles lineup, and he is sort of like the glue there, holding things together.
I really appreciated the way that you said that, Carlos, and I'll add to it because you point out, look, the wall gets moved back. The Orioles, have this abundance of left-handed hitters, and it helps their pitching. It's a great thing, but it feels like, the adjustment period, it took a second, but it really does feel like he has adjusted to it, and he has been a plenty capable hitter despite the fact that he's not just going to be able to get, easy home runs over the former left field porch.
Yeah, and we got to say, right, like there are no easy home runs, right?
Sure, that's fair. Thank
maybe
you.
It was easier,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
Because it was easier because the wall was closer. But at the end of the day, it's like, my goodness, to be able to score a ball and be on time to hit it and drive it to out of the ballpark is an extremely difficult thing. It's the hardest thing to do in all sports. And let's just go look at that game in particular, the one that you're pointing out. He had that home run straight away center field, slightly to right center. It was a pitch that was low and away. And Mountcastle went through that pitch without rolling over his wrist, stayed through the baseball, hit a home run. And now the Orioles got a lead against the Yankees and kind of setting the tone. But then you go later in the game, he hit an absolute rocket up the middle the other way on a fastball that was way up and in, and he was able to get inside of it, get the barrel to it, and it was professional hitting. It was professional hitting at its finest, right? So the finesse, the power, and there you go. The Orioles were able to get the W, and Mountcastle was in the middle of it. So I felt the need to make sure that we do not forget about how important Mountcastle is in this ball club, because it's easy to overlook because we have so many stars that are just making a huge splash with a lot of hype, with a lot of and look, a lot of it is merited. So they deserve certainly all the hype in the world and all the praise in the world. But man, Mountcastle has been that steady force behind what's happening over there in Baltimore.
I feel like the other part too, Carlos, and I know that people chuckle when you talk about like first base defense, right? Because in history, you just put whoever over at first base, they'll figure it out. But you're probably the perfect person to talk to about this. Like Ryan Mountcastle moved to first base as a major leaguer, and to me has very quickly become a plus first baseman. Like he regularly makes these sort of pickups and stretches they look routine with him over there. I feel like that there is a value to that that goes beyond just any old player that you would put over to play first base.
Yeah, I absolutely hate that when people say, "Oh, you just put him at first."
Right.
Like, my goodness, first base is a difficult position to play because one thing is to just catch the ball at first base, and then another is to play the position the correct way. I'll tell you this: a good first baseman makes everyone else in that infield better. They will tell you if you ask them, even though if there is not something or a stat that quantifies how much a first baseman contributes to the defense. Go ask the shortstop. Go ask Gunnar Henderson what it means to have Mountcastle at first base to throw to. Like, just think about the footwork. Doesn't matter where the ball's thrown. I worked so hard on making sure that every single throw that came to me from the other infielders was secure. And I had my systems. I would expect a bad throw at all times and be surprised by the good one instead of the other way around, be surprised by a bad one. And it seems like Mountcastle gets that very clearly. So you see the scoops, it's so easy to take for granted. You see the footwork. You see him come off the bag, catch and tag. So easy to see, like, anybody can do that. No, wrong. Not anyone can do that. And think about what it does to the entire infield. So the plays that are being made, even though you're like, oh, that was a routine play. Well, it's a routine play because every single infielder trusts who they're throwing to. Otherwise, they would have to be extremely careful and kind of tentative when they throw the ball to first base. Think about a 162-game season then and how many putouts are happening. Why do infielders feel confident throwing to a first baseman? Because a first baseman gives them assurance. It makes everyone better, and that's something that stats, you can't really see it in the stat sheet, but it's absolutely huge and valuable.
He is Carlos Peña, MLB Network. We've linked up the segment that they did on our Twitter account at Glenn Clark Radio. If you haven't seen it yet, it was really a wonderful dive into what Ryan Mountcastle has brought to the Orioles. Carlos, if I could, the Orioles, they're obviously they're off to a great start to the season. They're just coming off a heck of a week in which they went 6-1 against the Yankees and the Reds. Do you look at this group right now and say, as constructed, this team is capable of winning the World Series this year?
Absolutely. I mean, they definitely have all the tools necessary to go all the way and win it. We saw an early exit last season where we were like, wow, this is a surprise. Wow, they're playing this good baseball. Everyone was quote unquote surprised when in reality you're like, wait a second, no, these are the talent. This is the talent that we've been talking about for a while, and now this talent is executing between the lines. It's just always kind of like a shock when it actually happens. So that's why people were saying the Orioles are a surprise, but not anymore, right? So now they come into this season. Orioles go out there and they find themselves in this great position, winning 15 out of the last 20, really dominant performance. The pitching has been absolutely just stellar, and the lineup swinging the bats, with a lot of power, leading in home runs, the entire major leagues. I mean, and it's like, wait a second, everyone is contributing. So it's not like, you could argue that there's some guys, having incredible starts, like Gunnar and, Rutschman has been swinging the bat extremely well. The pitching has been lights out. But I like the sum of all parts. So that's why I say, when we talk about World Series, the sum of all parts needs to add up and give you a good result. It seems like if you go 1 through 9, you're going to get good ABs, solid at-bats, everyone putting together a tough AB. No one is an easy out. But you see the pitching, you know that they're going to give you, quality starts. You could almost bank on that. So the sum of all parts tells me this is a team that's constructed and very capable of getting to the postseason and most definitely winning a World Series.
One of the names you mentioned in there is Adley Rutschman. And, Carlos, we love the fact that people are talking about Gunnar Henderson as being an MVP right now. I'm almost like on a one-man crusade that we need to find a way to have a statistic that measures the value of the fact that on top of what Adley Rutschman is doing offensively, which has been outstanding this season, he's been the one primarily calling the pitches for a pitching staff that has been otherworldly. We don't have a stat for it. There's no way for us to know exactly what the value is. But I feel like Adley Rutschman should be more deserving of being talked about as that MVP type of player because it's a lethal combination what he's doing offensively and how he's handling this pitching staff right now.
I mean, I'm so happy to hear you talk about calling pitches If you know me and if you watch me, you know that I'm a huge a fan of effective velocity, sequencing, tunneling. And you're like, you're a hitter, Carlos. Well, how come you are talking about pitching? As a matter of fact, I would argue that hitters know more about pitching than the pitchers themselves at times, outside of mechanics, because we as hitters understand what makes pitchers difficult to hit. Okay, so one of the best things a pitcher could do is probably speak and talk to one of their teammates who are hitters. It's like, what makes it hard, right? Well, Adley Rutschman behind the plate, calling pitches and calling very effective strategic sequences. It's what makes these pitchers pitch at the elite level. How many times we've seen guys, this guy throws 100 miles per hour, has a nasty slider, and they get absolutely raked, right? They get hit. You're like, why is this happening? These guys got great stuff. Well, it speaks to the sequencing. Are they sequencing poorly? Are they actually throwing pitches into hitters' bats, which happens a lot? Well, Rutschman has done a great job of maximizing the weapons that his pitching staff has. And no one in general, you just did it, no one in general really point that out.
Yeah.
It's always like, oh, that slider is nasty.
Right.
Who cares about the slider in a vacuum? It's how you utilize all of your pieces. It's like the chess. Don't even get me going on this because I'm huge on this. But it's true. It's like if you're playing chess, you have a bunch of pieces on the board, and it doesn't matter that the rook is a great one to have. If you only utilize the rook, you're not going to win in chess. You got to mix in the knight. The pawns have to move correctly. The bishop has to move correctly to set up everything else. It's the same thing with pitching. It seems like Rutschman is a master player, chess player, and that's what he does. He gets the best out of his pitchers, and it's absolutely awesome to watch. And I think he can only get better. We definitely need to come up with some sort of stat that quantifies the contribution of the game calling behind the plate.
It's going to, you and I, man, we're going to go to war. By the way, I could listen to you talk about this for a long time because it's fascinating, but you and I are going to put our heads down and we're going to figure out a way for everybody to understand the value of what it is that Adley Rutschman's doing working with these pitchers right now, because it's insane. Carlos, before I let you go,
we're going on a campaign. We're going on a campaign about this.
We just got to come up with a clever catchphrase. We'll find a campaign manager, and then we are going to take the world by storm so that we can get these guys the recognition they deserve. Before I let you go, Carlos, and I really appreciate the time, man, the one area that I think there might be a little bit of concern, and I searched through, I guess maybe the one guy that you were never teammates with during your career was Craig Kimbrell. I think Craig can be effective, and we've seen him be really effective, right? On Friday night against the Reds, he was dominant, struck out the side in the ninth. But the usage, and it just feels like maybe we're at a place in his career where what it might require to be a high-end closer for a World Series winner, that might be a lot to ask of him to go out there that frequently during the course of a season. Are you a little at all concerned about the back end of the Orioles bullpen? Do you feel like that's something that they're going to need to look to address coming up here in July?
Yes, that's definitely, there's a concern there. But at the same time, I feel that the O's could have the ability to put out fires, right? So instead of thinking about perhaps having a role of a closer, I think it's always best to have a mentality that if you're in the bullpen, you need to be ready to go out and be a fireman. Just be fireman. When do you need me? There's a fire here. There's a high leverage situation, so I need you to come out and put it out. Now, the thing with Kimbrell is that if you were to look at that combination of breaking pitch and the elevated four-seamer, it's absolutely deadly. But he needs to be able to execute it, and he needs to be able to sequence those correctly. That's what we're talking about, Rutschman behind the plate calling the right pitches. But Rutschman can call the right pitches, and then you have Kimbrell not execute them. That can happen. And that's when we get into the mechanics. And that's when now I have to step back and say, how do you fix the mechanics so that you can actually throw it where you want to throw it? That's my concern. It's like, can he throw it where he wants to throw it first? And then if you're going to trust Rutschman to make the right call and put down the right fingers as to what pitch to throw, well, we don't put fingers anymore. We'll call the right
pitch com, right. Yep.
You still have to execute what Rutschman is asking for. So you have the master player calling the strategy behind the plate, but then, you have to be able to execute and throw the pitch that you're being asked to throw and throw it in the location that you're being asked to throw it. So that's the difficulty. And now that's something that we don't have much control over. It's mechanics. Can he control and know where the ball is going? So, yeah, there is a little bit of a question mark there, but I think that the Orioles have the wherewithal and the depth to deal with the situation. And as long as that bullpen has the mentality of being firemen, they should be just fine.
Okay, I like the sounds of that. Let's make sure it stays that way. I just want to hear you say it one more time. Plakata. Can you say it for me one more time? Because I love hearing it. I love that. I love that so much, man. That's
and the Orioles have been doing a lot of.
They've been doing a lot of it, no doubt. Bro.
A lot,
no doubt. That's how you follow him on Twitter, by the way. If you want to find Carlos Peña. Carlos, this was so much fun, man. We would love to do this again down the road. Thank you for spending some time with us here in Baltimore this morning.
Oh, it's truly a pleasure. I look forward to the next time.